I do not believe it would be constitutional for the government to target and kill any U.S. citizen with a drone or with a shotgun without due process. But when a U.S. citizen goes abroad to wage war against America and is actively plotting to kill U.S. citizens, and when neither the United States nor our partners are in a position to capture him before he carries out a plot, his citizenship should no more serve as a shield than a sniper shooting down on an innocent crowd should be protected from a SWAT team.
That was President Obama almost 9 months ago, laying out his legal framework for killing American citizens who have been deemed national security threats. This week, the White House faces the same decision. This time, though, the public is being let in on it for the most part. National news outlets are reporting this week that the administration is currently weighing whether to authorize a drone strike against an American citizen living in Pakistan, an American who officials believe is actively plotting terrorist attacks against U.S. citizens. According to the AP, which first reported the story, 2 officials described the man as an al-Qaeda facilitator who had been directly responsible for deadly attacks against U.S. citizens overseas and continues to plan attacks. Officials said the suspected terrorist is well guarded and in a fairly remote location, so any attempt to capture him would be, quote, too risky and even more politically explosive than a U.S. missile strike. The Justice Department is reportedly working to build a case against the man right now, a process that may be more complicated than the last time the U.S. killed an American citizen abroad. Under a new U.S. drone policy announced last year, terrorist suspects overseas can only be killed by the military and not the CIA. The problem here is that Pakistan, where the suspected terrorist is allegedly based, refuses military action on its soil. So if the U.S. government is to go ahead with this extrajudicial killing, the target would have to be executed by the CIA. But as with all things related to national security and the war on terror, the gray areas are abundant. This week, a U.S. official told the AP that the president could make an exception to his drone policy, which incidentally is less than a year old, and authorize the CIA to strike on a one-time basis. Alternately, President Obama could authorize the Pentagon to go ahead with the strike despite Pakistan's objections as a sovereign country. For the record, under this administration, the United States has killed 4 American citizens abroad without due process. Joining me now is the director for the ACLU National Security Project, Hina Shamsi. Hina, it is always great to see you. These are complicated questions and complicated times, but let's start first with the fact that we even know about this. Do you think this is a bid on the part of the administration to gauge public sentiment ahead of a targeted drone strike?
Alex, thanks for having me again. It is hard to know what's going on in the heads of the administration officials who have been providing these kinds of disclosures. The first story was one in which they identified the person as an American but didn't even identify the country in which he was located. What I do think is notable is that this is a stark and disturbing reminder of how little we actually know about the administration's legal interpretations of its authority to kill people, citizens and non-citizens alike. And this is also part of a disturbing pattern in which the actual evidence that justifies the use of lethal force against people is kept secret, but government officials, the only thing we know from the government are disclosures by anonymous government officials that often end up being self-serving and selective.
Hina, what do you make of this bid towards a more transparent drone policy and shifting the attacks from the CIA to the Department of Defense? Do you think that is meaningful in any way? And I ask that in full awareness of the fact that that may not hold for this strike if it does take place.
Sure. So there have been promises of transparency from senior government officials, including President Obama in his speech in May of last year, and those promises have not been borne out. We still don't know, Alex, basic information about the number and identity of people killed, except for U.S. citizens. And that citizenship-based discrepancy is not one that makes us look good in the eyes of the world, and justifiably it shouldn't. It doesn't matter what your citizenship is. We should know who we're killing and on what basis. Now, there had been sort of trial balloons floated about transferring authority for killings from the CIA to the Department of Defense. And that would certainly be a good thing, because the CIA, which should be a foreign intelligence agency, has now turned into a paramilitary killing organization. But since then, it appears that there are delays, and perhaps this won't even happen. And in fact, there was a secret annex to last year's National Defense Authorization Act that would seek to prohibit the transfer of killing authority from the CIA to the Department of Defense. That is profoundly disturbing, should disturb us all.
You know, Hannah, I will say, you know, when the president makes his case, we played the sound very specifically because he makes the broader argument that, you know, we can't shield these citizenship cannot be a shield for people that are trying to take down American lives or to end American lives and commit acts of terrorism. And it is a persuasive argument. And public sentiment would seem to reflect an agreement with the president. I think according to a Gallup poll taken last year, 65% of Americans support drone attacks on terrorists abroad. 41% support airstrikes against U.S. citizens who are quote unquote suspected terrorists. The issue here is that, I mean, I think to your point, the administration is supposed to be ordering these targeted drone strikes based on the notion of imminent threat, which in and of itself is so open to interpretation that it's really subject to any administration to define the term imminent threat. Do you think we are on a course? Do you think the administration has set us on any course at all to be more aware of what is happening overseas in terms of our counterterrorism policy, and also to redefine as a public the notion of what is imminent threat?
Sure. And first of all, Alex, let me say that we agree with President Obama that citizenship is not a valid distinction, in that we think that the same rules apply to citizens and non-citizens alike. The only difference is that there's no question that American citizens have a right to judicial review that, unfortunately, the courts have narrowed for non-citizens. Now, that said, I think you're hitting again on one of the most important points, and you've discussed this before in the program, and it's worth emphasizing. There are very exceptional circumstances under which lethal force can be used in the context of an actual armed conflict, for example, if someone's participating in hostilities, and outside of war, if someone poses a true imminent threat. But the administration's definition of imminence is so broad that it does violence to life, to language, and law itself. And that, I think, is the most disturbing aspect of where we are headed.
The ACLU's Hina Shamsi, thank you as always for your time.
Thank you.
After the break, critics are blasting New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio today for keeping New York City schools open during a tough and brutal winter storm. But for many of the students who can't always get a hot meal at home, there is actually a very good reason for keeping schools open. That's next.